Okay, as I'm looking at these posts and finding a topic of conversation, I'm reading these posts and I reprofiled from 21 to 18. And I understand that, but I want to talk to you guys that are just getting started with your sharpening and just point out that, and not to scold anybody, to make a conversation. That knife was made the way it was made with that angle because that's the way the maker chose to match the hardness of the steel to the shape of the knife, to the physics, to that knife edge. If they are truly a knife maker that's doing these things. There are knife makers, not to diverge, but there are knife makers that make knives just to sell them. And they don't really care whether they're made the way a craftsman makes a knife. They're still decent steel and they still have an edge and they still have a handle and they do everything they're supposed to do for the price point, but they're not made the way a craftsman with years of knife making and sword making history, or a younger guy with new technology history that cares about those things makes a knife. One is more about aesthetics and the other is, I don't know, aesthetics and function. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But when you get a knife that's made like this Maximet knife looks like, and it's probably an expensive knife, the guy that made that knife, they made it a certain way. And these knives that we buy, like Josh is showing, that guy made them a certain way, and I think there's some thought to it. So when we look to lower the angle, you have to understand one thing is that you're always taking away steel, and that a narrower angle is closer to the center line of the knife and the thickness is involved. And because you get closer, the bevels get taller. And if you find out that you put too steep of a bevel on a knife that's too heavy, the way you use it and that tip, you getting broken off because it's hard steel, because you're applying more force than the physics of that bevel angle can be supported. Just because it's a lot of steel behind it, but you have to understand that you're pushing that edge into what you're cutting. It's proportional to the thickness of the knife and the handle. All that's considered when you're making a knife. So if you try to change the physics of it, you're changing the appearance and you're doing some change to the steel. And if you find out that it wasn't to your liking, when you go back, you have these tall bevels, and now you're going to be putting a short, what appears like a micro bevel at that wider angle, trying to recover to go back to the wider angle that it started with. So you're going to make that tall bevel, and now you're going to try to, so if you want to obliterate it, to get rid of it, now you've lost all that steel and you moved the edge down to a wider part of the knife. So what I'm suggesting to you is when you look to reprofile, do it stepwise, incrementally, in half degree at the most, and use it for a while and see how it behaves. But those big jumps, because of the way the knife was made, yeah, it's a hard steel. In this example, I said Maximat. It's steel is Magna Cut. Excuse me, for all you guys that know the American steels more than I do. I use mostly Japanese knives. The Magna Cut, it is a harder steel, I believe, and brittle, more brittle. So I don't know, but I'm going to tell you this, that from 21 to 18 degrees is miles in bevel talk. A 15-degree knife is miles difference to a 20-degree knife, looking at the knife. So it seems simple, but it makes a big difference, especially on the extremes, very thin knives and very thick knives. So both ways. Going wider, starting thin, and going wider. Thin going wider is okay, but everything that you do moves the knife shorter, and then the only way to recover it is to thin the knife. So I always look to, from the onset, think about and plan what I'm doing so it's not to put me in that backing up mode because I screwed up, because I've done that. I've ruined, in my mind, I ruined lots of knives. I learned by them. When I say I ruined them, I sharpened them to a point that I chose not to want to use them anymore because there was nothing for me to learn anymore by sharpening them. I used them to learn the lessons, and I gained by them, and then I moved on. And now I don't make those same mistakes. And I'm not saying you're going to make a mistake by going 21 to 18 degrees, because I don't know. I don't know Magna Cut, and I don't know the ramifications of that particular knife. I'm trying to say in conversation to all of you knife sharpeners, think about these things before you do it. Do them incrementally, because it's a big difference. 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees is a big difference in sharpening knives, and the way the knife was made, especially more expensive knives, means something. Thanks.